Tim Shields, founder and CEO of Hardshell Labs and lifelong contract field biologist. Welcome to the Epic Human Podcast.
It's great to be here.
It's a joy to have you. We were introduced by Jen Bradwell, who was the editor of the film that is really all about you and your work called EcoHack that's coming out soon. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first off, we'd just love to learn and share with the audience a little bit more about you and Hardshell Labs.
So we can get into more detail about my past, but the short version is I spent 35 years basically documenting the decline of my favorite animal on Earth. I mean, I took careful notes on a 95% decline in desert tortoises and studied in excruciating detail why that was happening. And that led me to a moment of deep frustration with just watching the unfolding disaster and doing nothing about it. And I reached a breaking point, and I just said, I got to find some tools to address some of what ails this species. And the problem I identified was raven predation. It's a very obvious source of mortality for tortoises. And that led me into exploring technological options for addressing the problem. And then once we as a team formed around me, kind of like-minded souls with different skills, we realized that these tools are applicable for solving a number of problems that corporations, businesses, and government entities were also trying to solve. And so there's this beautiful complementarity between trying to address a conservation problem and discovering that there are also people who will pay to solve the same problem, and the solution of the problem serves everybody's interests other than the ravens that we're trying to manage, but they don't get to vote.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the problem, right?
Sure.
So we're talking about desert tortoises and predation by ravens.
That's the problem.
Okay.
This is a juvenile tortoise that was probably 6 years old, roughly, and its shell was in the process of hardening, but hadn't yet hardened enough to resist the attack of this raven. This was definitely killed by a raven, which flipped the tortoise over. Ravens are really good at this. They know right where the soft spot is, and there's a soft spot dead center on the underside called the plastron. So this one got flipped over, and the raven just hammered its way in, largely probably to get the liver, because the liver is rich in fat. But there are other fatty internal organs. That's what the ravens are after. They want the caloric jolt, and they get it from opening this container and removing the inside. So I picked up, in the course of my career, hundreds, possibly thousands of dead baby tortoises that had been killed by ravens. So that was the original motivation for just like, what can we use to either scare ravens away or teach them not to eat tortoises or reduce their numbers? And at the start, I didn't have a clue, but the confluence of technology, the combination of technological options and my knowledge of tortoise and raven biology, plus all the expert knowledge in both the technological and biological, ecological management fields, all of that, my role is sort of to synthesize that. But I didn't generate a hell of a lot of a fair bit of the original knowledge, but mostly it's like, drones, there's a use for drone technology, and there's a use for a lot of cameras, and 3D printing, we'll get into that. So anyway, there's a ton of technology that it turns out very few biologists are comfortable with or have thought of applying. And I was just like, I want to keep tortoises on the planet, and they were going away really fast. And so it's like, there's not much time. I better find all the tools available and talk to all the people who understand the tools and figure out how to apply them. So that's
Okay.
That's
and I want to get
high level.
And I want to get to the solution. But let's set the context a little bit. And so two-part question. One is, you like I mentioned before, you are a lifelong contract field biologist. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how long you've been doing it?
Sure.
And then the second piece would be like, why is this a new problem? Like it feels like it's a new problem. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about why it's so recent.
I massively lucked out. I got a master's degree at UC Riverside in 1979, and I walked right into a job at the very start. This woman, Christine Berry, who's this brilliant tortoise conservationist, she was starting a multi-decade population monitoring project. I stumbled into it. I didn't want to be an academic. I was not cut out to be a PhD. And I knew it halfway through my master's degree. It's just like, this is it for me. And so I walk into this job, and here's this person that's got funding and is going to fund this effort for, she had in mind, 30-year project. Because it takes that long with tortoises, things go slowly, including nominally, appropriately, like changes in population numbers should be very gradual. We found that wasn't the case. It was a catastrophic decline. At any rate, I stepped into the perfect job for me at that time, which entailed going out and living in the desert. I had a VW van, and I just would go out, park it, and I'd be out in the desert, except for supply runs for 2.5 to 3 months, completely alone other than with the tortoises. It was great. I got really quiet inside, and I also just got to look at the miraculous planet we live on in wonderful detail. It was excruciating watching the tortoises disappear, but geez, what a planet. And so that, it paid my bills. I had very modest needs at the time, but it paid those well. I was paid to go out and look at planet Earth and figure out the puzzle. And then it led me to this quest for solving a really, what to me was a very important problem.
And sorry, I know I'm asking you multiple questions in a row, but just follow up on that. Like in the conservation biology world, is it more common to kind of focus on like kind of observing and studying and research? Are you kind of atypical in that you're looking at technical solutions, or you're looking at solutions in general?
Very atypical. At least looking for getting comfortable with technology and application of technology to solve these problems. Most biologists are very not politically conservative, but sort of philosophically conservative and suspicious of change. And we have watched technology run amok and basically run over the natural world. And so we're shy of it. It's like, that's the thing that's destroying the systems that we love. And so biologists tend to be very leery of adopting new technology. Plus, we're generally uncomfortable with it, and we get used to one system, even if it's the most primitive system possible. There's an example of tortoise tracking that we're using pre-World War II tortoise tracking technology because we're familiar with it. Everybody knows it, and it's like, oh, we know how to do that. And it is absurd how much money is spent using this ancient technology. And it is ancient, but it's because everybody's used to it, and nobody's thinking, I won't say nobody, but few biologists are really pushing the envelope. And so when I made the change and I just said, I'm trying to save tortoises, it was like that opened up all the options. I can't afford to be leery of this or that technology. I have to understand, what can it do? Is it an upgrade over what's available? Or is it a brand new thing that will solve a problem that otherwise is insoluble? So that's the drive behind it. And yeah, I'm atypical because now I'm this kind of crazy techno optimist. I'm actually a skeptic of it, and I feel like we're opening Pandora's box, but I feel like we don't have an option. If I'm going to have a significant impact on solving this problem, I got to have the fullest toolbox possible. And it's really thrilling to actually have developed some tools as well in the course of the pursuit. So,
and based on your research, what precipitated the raven problem?
Humans. Absolute. Like there's no doubt it's a human caused problem, because if you go to a native, natural, intact piece of Mojave Desert, you're surrounded by creosote bushes and not much else. There's over huge areas of tortoise habitat, there's nowhere for a raven to build a nest. There's no water in the form that's easily accessible to ravens. There's really not enough food to support ravens. So it's a bad place to be a raven. Now go to a desert city. There are golf courses with water hazards, and there are lawn sprinklers, and there's agriculture with irrigation, so water is not a problem. There are utility towers which make wonderful nest platforms, and those utility towers stretch across that previously unoccupiable habitat. It happens to be full of tortoises. There's roadkill. There's McDonald's dumpsters. It's Shangri-La. It's nirvana for ravens. Wild animals, when they're provided limitless energy, turn it into babies. And so ravens have both massively increased the number of eggs they can hatch, and the survival rate of their young, because of these subsidies, has been hugely increased. And so it's been somewhere a 2 to 3% population growth per year. And over 50 years, that's compound interest. And so we've got, it's hard to say, but somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 50 times as many ravens as we had. And I've watched it myself. I mean, I'm an old desert rat, and there were ravens out when I was a young man, scrambling around the desert. There were ravens there, but nothing like there is now. It's just it's been remarkable to watch as a biological phenomenon, the proliferation of ravens. So they're wiping out tortoises. They're also wiping out many other species of desert wildlife. On the coast, they're wiping out shorebirds. In the Great Basin Desert, they're wiping out sage grouse. So there's this whole set of victims of raven overpopulation that we can benefit with the same set of tools. But then there's agriculture. Pistachio farmers can be wiped out by ravens. And at dairy farms right now, there's a set of species at dairy farms, but ravens are prominent at dairy farms, and they eat the grain. They're just sitting there at the feeding trough competing with the cows. We're working right now at a sewage treatment plant, and they don't have a particular problem with ravens, but they spend $35,000 a year cleaning up after the ravens. And so there are all these industrial interests and agricultural interests for whom the tools we're developing to save the tortoise also can save a bunch of money for a bunch of business people. And I have my problems with capitalism, but the thing that excites me right now is that there are ways to align multiple interests, the regulatory interests of government, the commercial interests of various entities, and conservation interests. And so the trick, I think, is finding those places where everybody can fly in formation. And like I said, everybody but the ravens is all for it. And I'm really excited by that, because I think that's the true innovation is, all right, where do our interests align such that any contribution from any partner benefits everybody who's part of the partnership? So
Well, that's what gets me excited too about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And just in general, I mean, I tend to think like if you boil down business, like, to its most formational elements, it's just about finding win-wins, right? And so, and ideally win-win-wins, right? Where all stakeholders benefit. So just one clarifying question for us non-biologists, is there a difference between a raven and a common crow?
Yes.
Okay.
They're cousins essentially. Ravens are much larger. There are a bunch of subtle cues. The easiest one for an amateur to look at is probably the tone of voice of a raven. Yesterday, a couple days ago, I was in Golden Gate Park. There were both ravens and crows. There was a mass of crows, like 300. And I can't go anywhere now without seeing crows and ravens. It's like, oh, there they are. So anyway, there were about 300 crows just yakking it up. And then these two ravens came by, and the tone of voice, like a crow's up around here, and a raven's down around here. So it's a lower register. They have a bigger beak. Ravens have a very massive beak relative to their size. They have a wedge-shaped tail rather than a cut-off flat tail. But also, it's the rhythm of the wing beat. This is a raven. This is a crow. So,
I see.
Yeah, they're different, and crows don't like ravens at all because ravens will go eat baby crows. They're not. It's not like, hey, cousin, I'll leave you alone. It's like, hey, you got some eggs there. I'll have those. Ravens are brilliant. I love ravens. They are not my enemy. I don't love how many there are, but I don't hate the animal itself. They're fascinating to work with.
Highly intelligent too. Right.
Oh,
it makes them a worthy adversary too. I bet.
The worthy opponent. It's just like, I joke that ravens know me. Many ravens know me individually. They know who I am, and they don't like me.
Right.
I look at ravens and I go, I can't tell one from the other. Although now we actually put radios on 20 ravens just this spring or just this fall. And so we're spying on them because they're carrying around these GPS trackers. It's mind-blowing what we're finding out about how they're moving through this human landscape. They don't go out in the desert and forage this time of year. They're hanging out at dairies and dumpsters and waste disposal operations. They're they're linked to us, and they depend on us, and their numbers are a result of our transformation of the ecosystem. And when I look at the number of ravens, I just see human clumsiness and thoughtlessness. And it's just like we don't think ahead of time about the implications of our actions. And the evidence is there in big, black, noisy birds. Just like, there it is. That's us kind of stumbling around and just, because we like to live in a place with a bunch of water. We spread water in the desert, and that ensures the survival of ravens who in springtime go out into tortoise habitat and establish a nest and need to feed the babies. And so this is raven baby food.
So you got sick of seeing this day in and day out, and you decided to do something about it. So
I'm going to add a little visceral punch to that.
Please.
I sequentially covered the same plot starting in 1979. The last time I covered it was 2012. And essentially, it was a thriving metropolis of tortoises when I started, and it was a ghost town when I finished. That hit me. It's just like, because I could remember this exact spot. I would find 15 tortoises a day in 79. And now in 2012, I'm lucky if I find a tortoise a day. Very lucky. And there were plenty of days where I couldn't find a single tortoise. That hit me. It's just like, because all of the reminders of the good old days were there, except the tortoises were gone. So
let's talk about the solutions that you've developed, and maybe you could bring us back to like that initial light bulb moment where you
Yeah.
said, hey, like,
Yep.
and where you started and how it's come from?
All right. I was on a plot. I'm really good at finding baby tortoises. Like, I'm really good at finding tortoises this size. I've honed that skill among tortoise biologists, and I'm old enough in the field that I got to practice when there were hundreds of them. So I had this particular obsession with finding baby tortoises. And I was working in 2011, I was working on a plot. I couldn't find a single juvenile tortoise. I couldn't find a single burrow of a juvenile tortoise. Meanwhile, ravens are flying overhead all day long. I had a volunteer who was working with me. She comes in one day, and I told her, this is really weird that we don't find any baby tortoises. She comes to me one day and she says, well, I saw a baby tortoise today. And I got all excited. I did this. And she said it was in the beak of a raven. She could see its legs kind of windmilling, the legs of the tortoise kind of doing this as it's being carried to its doom in the beak of this raven. That was the only baby tortoise. The only baby tortoise we saw was 20 feet up in the air in the beak of a raven. That was the breaking point. It's just like, the hell am I doing just taking notes on this thing? At which point I just started thinking like, okay, what's possible? The only thing I came up with was radio-controlled airplanes. I have a history with model aviation. I just thought, well, I guess you could chase them around with a radio-controlled airplane. Doesn't seem very practical, but it's all I got. So that led to me going to Edwards Air Force Base and talking to the base biologist saying, hey, I want to do what's available, because he was, Edwards Air Force Base is a testing center for the Air Force. And somebody had said, well, you ought to think about drones. So I went in, I talked to the guy about drones. I got connected with this guy, Roy Haggard, who's this genius engineer. He was the first engineer I encountered. And so I started just, okay, if radio-controlled airplanes aren't it, but drones are a lot more maneuverable and functional. And then, at the Edwards meeting, the base biologist said, oh, you ought to look at this. And he showed me this video of a guy steering a flock of geese with a laser. I didn't know beans about lasers, but it's like, wow, look at that. So I contacted that guy and I said, we've got this problem with ravens. I have no idea if lasers will work on ravens, but we've got a problem for you. He brought his lasers out. They work like a dream. So a year after my Genesis moment, I had a laser in my hands the first night we tried them out. And none of us knew our laser's going to be effective on these things. And we in about 2 or 3 seconds, we scared 250 ravens out of a couple of cottonwood trees. And then he says, you want to try it? I said, hell yeah. and it was a little bit after sunset, so the sky was darkening, so I could see the laser beam. And I picked out among this mass of milling, confused ravens, because they're going like, what the hell was that? I picked one out, and it was flying along. I'll never forget this. It's flying along a path, and I put the beam in front of it, and it just did this, and did a 180 like that. And I was hooked. It's like, that worked. What else can we do with lasers? And then
just real quick, is this like a typical like laser pointer, or is it like some
scaled
sort of
up
more high functioning?
It's high functioning. It was with pretty exquisite optics.
Okay.
And much more powerful.
I see.
Not a toy. These
Right.
are not toys.
Right,
And I want to it's not like la la la. It's a little red laser you play with your cat with. These are tools.
Got it.
And you don't play with a circular saw just for the hell of it. You don't fire up a circular saw and just fiddle around with it.
Exactly.
They demand caution. But so then one other crazy early idea was, let's make a fake tortoise. How can I make a model tortoise? There were styrofoam models in existence. They weren't very good. And I was up in my home in Alaska in Haines, and I knew this kid who was a genius. He's a genius. He's this brilliant kid. And he knew all this technology. And I said, how could we make a fake baby tortoise? And he says, 3D print it. That was a new one on me. So the science teacher bought a low-end 3D printer. This kid, I got a scan done of a tortoise shell. So I take this tortoise shell to this scanning operation, get the digital file, bring it back to Eli, and he freaking prints a fake baby tortoise, and I painted it, and we started using them. Then I went to Autodesk. Blessings on Autodesk. That's an amazing company. They have helped us a huge amount.
Wow.
Like, I could sing the praises of Autodesk for an entire episode of this. At any rate, they looked at the crude version and said, we can do much better. They did.
Wow.
They took the same scan, and the resolution of this is remarkable. Like, have a look.
Yeah. It looks
because here's the original.
Wow. They're like almost indistinguishable.
Yes.
I mean, they both look very natural.
And they seem to be indistinguishable to ravens, which is the point of the exercise.
Right.
Because we now have weaponized the fake baby tortoises such that, and it involves a canister buried underneath the model. And when a raven comes up and attacks this thing, it gets this shot of fake grape juice, artificial grape flavoring, which is called methylantranolate, in the face. And it's this miraculous chemical compound because it's completely non-toxic. It's what's in Welch's grape juice. When you see artificial grape flavoring, it's methylantranolate. But for some reason, birds are incredibly sensitive to this stuff. It's like pepper spray for birds. Everybody else, to me, it's just kind of an obnoxious grape smell. But to birds, it's like apparently, burning pain or whatever. And so we've got these things tuned with these really cool sensors that when a raven attacks this and molests it to a certain degree, boom, it goes off in their face. And so those are the three. It's like lasers, drones, and fake baby tortoises got us going, and now we're deep into it.
Wow,
it's fascinating.
So it sounds like, yeah, I mean, for the fake baby tortoise, it's kind of like a trap, and then the idea is that it deters them from wanting to go after real baby tortoises.
It's a training.
Okay.
It's a training. There's this thing called aversive training, and there's taste aversion is where like you treat a meat bait with a chemical that will, after a certain delay, will cause nausea in the animal that has essentially food poisoning. It's induced food poisoning. That's taste aversion. This is, I don't even know how to characterize it because it's new. It's a new thing, but we're trying to give them an aversion to attacking baby tortoises. So we're rewiring their brains.
And how long does that last?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
It's early. We do know that ravens treat these things just like another food item because we've compared their behavior with many other food items through watching them. So we know they take these as far as we can tell, they think these are real tortoises.
Right.
And they're mightily surprised when the things, I mean, it's the exploding cigar trick for ravens. It's hilarious to watch. There is a sequence in Eco Hack of this happening, and it's very funny. And the ravens pick themselves up and like, what the hell just happened? That's what we're trying. We're trying to plant seeds of doubt in their mind. And the same with the lasers. We're trying to take this land that humans have turned into Shangri-La and turn it into a hell of insecurity for them, such that they go away. It's just like they can't trust it, and there's these crazy bright lights coming at them and these flying things they're unfamiliar with. Ultimately, we're trying to train them. We're trying to discourage them from occupying the desert. It doesn't solve, this is all treating symptoms though. But fundamentally, we need to deny them access to the resources that allow their numbers to be so inflated. And we're now working on that. And that's really exciting because we're getting to the point with several of our projects are starting to show really positive results on both on a conservation level, but if we solve the conservation problem, we're also reducing agricultural losses, and we're reducing the expenses for a lot of different businesses that they have to deal with the ramifications of all these ravens around. So again, it's that alignment of interests, and it's not by design, but when you encounter it, you can foster it and work to align those interests. So that's kind of where we are.
And can you also talk about the egg oiling?
Yes, that's been the principal use of the drones. Mm-hmm. There's a technique called egg oiling. It has been used for 70 years on ground nesting birds, like Canada geese are problematic. In fact, Foster City, down by San Mateo, is inundated with Canada geese. They've moved in, and quite like the ravens, just like, hey, thank you very much, humans. You've made a great place for us to hang out and be geese and have baby geese. And they crap all over the place. And there's like, you go down there and there's geese everywhere. So egg oiling was used for decades on geese and on double-crested cormorants, on birds that nest near or on the ground. But we looked at the partner company, some other contract biologists called Sundance Biological. We partnered with them, and we looked at, well, can we get up to nests up high? And how would we do that? How would we get oil on nests that are out of reach of human beings? And there's a set of nests from 10 to 30 feet high, and we use telescoping poles to reach those. But there are nests 120 feet high in utility towers. No pole is going to reach that, but a drone can. And so think of it as a high-tech squirt gun with a camera that is associated with a nozzle that's going to spray the oil. Then you need an oil containment vessel and a source of pressure. Once you have those elements, you can reliably spray this oil quite some distance, actually, multiple meters. You can send a jet of this oil onto the eggs. They don't hatch at that point. A thin coat of oil interrupts gas exchange across the eggshell. Basically, the embryo suffocates. But because the eggs are structurally undamaged, the adults keep taking care of them. And so you've wiped out a year's worth of reproductive output, but you continue to engage them. So rather than going off and laying a new set of eggs, they keep taking care of these eggs that aren't going to hatch. And it sounds like a dirty trick. And it's just like, I'm not thrilled that we're at a point where we kind of have to do stuff like this, but it has worked tremendously well. We've applied it. Fish and Wildlife Service got on it, and they said, yeah, we like this a lot. A number of utilities are on the hook because they've created those big towers. We've worked with a number of large utilities, and over time, we gained their trust that we could fly these drones up next to their sensitive infrastructure and not turn the lights out in Los Angeles. And now we're like in year 5 or 6, and it has just expanded. The exciting thing is that the Raven survey numbers, which are the way you tell, are you having an effect? In many of the areas we're operating, it appears Raven numbers are going down. So, and it's likely due to the egg oiling that we're doing. So it's rare in conservation biology where you get a clear win. It's too early to pop the champagne corks, but it's looking really good. And we've refined the techniques such that it's cheaper per unit to do this stuff. We've just gotten good at it and efficient. And we work with these great field biologists who know how to do it efficiently. And we've honed this particular weird little side pocket of conservation biology to where it's working. And that, I'll tell you, having that the energy that comes from that positive reinforcement is electrifying. Like everybody, and this is relatively new information, And everybody in our little circle of egg oilers is like, it's working. It's working. And
I can feel it.
That's really the fundamental thing, is that we're so trained to hopelessness that any little fragment of good news has a it's not a narcotic effect. It just has a stimulant effect. It's like caffeine.
Elation.
Yeah, elation and reinforcement of the pattern of innovation, hope for the future, and that's the energy you use to go do the next thing and the next thing, and it's tremendously exciting. And so I look at my checkered business career, because I was 58 years old when I became a businessman, and I was like, me, a capitalist? That's unusual. And I've had to learn the rules of the game, of this new and different game, relatively late in life. I mean, most startup people are in their 20s and 30s, and I'm an old fart. But it's really exciting, and now there's this joy in the potential that what we're really trying to do is foster hope and show that innovation in this, applying modern technology to these modern problems. And yes, the proliferation of ravens is basically something that's happened since World War II. Like, that's kind of addictive and exciting. I'm more awake than I've ever been in my life. I'm more jazzed, excited. I'm more frightened. Like, business is scary, and like not being able to make, we're burning through capital, and there are times where it's just like, we got no money. So there's that. But, getting a shot of good news, like, hey, the egg oiling is working, just keeping me in it. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And so now it's just like, how do I figure out the rules of the capitalist game and play it well enough that I can keep having this effect? Right. Because I want to save the world.
I can feel it. I can feel the energy, the electricity you mentioned. And, when you get that data back, that I can imagine how reinforcing that would be. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the commercial applications here, because on one hand, when I first saw this, I was thinking, wow, this is amazing. Governments and, nonprofits should pay for this, because it's a clear solution to what a lot of people think is a unsolvable problem. Mm-hmm. But I think what got me even more excited when we talked was the idea that you can find commercial applications, you can find businesses and industries that are willing to pay for this. And so, without getting into detail around like the specific customers or whatnot, maybe you could just give us some insight in how you kind of put together that puzzle of the win-win-wins.
Yeah, because like I said, it was like we came up with tools, particularly the lasers. It struck me, it's just like, it's very striking, their reaction. They are almost mystically the most laser sensitive birds we've encountered. And we've tested lasers on over 100 species of birds, and ravens are by far, crows are behind them. Ravens are by far the most sensitive. There may be a God. So you've got this thing, and it's like, I can keep ravens away from tortoise habitat. The problem with tortoises is they're widely dispersed, and they're relatively rare organisms spread over wide areas. Covering that with laser light is a problem. But look at where the ravens are really hanging out. They're hanging out at dairies and sewage treatment plants and composting facilities and landfills and the like. What if we keep them away from there and we deny them the food, particularly during winter, when usually the desert's really stingy in winter for a predator like a raven? Humans come in and take that away and just say, there's plenty of food. What if we deny them access to that food? Could we reduce their numbers? And then you're there. It's like, pistachio growers are getting hammered by ravens. Pistachios are really valuable. So we've worked with pistachio growers, and we've demonstrated earlier versions of our technology weren't there's a technical problem with orchards, and that is there are a bunch of tree trunks in the way of the laser beam. We have ways around it now, but at the time we did it, that sort of reduced the effectiveness. But when you had a clear shot at a raven, it went away and it left the pistachio orchard alone. I was at this pistachio orchard. I built this crazy tower, and I lived in this tower for a month and just was zapping ravens as they came to this 30-acre pistachio orchard. And I'll never forget, after I stopped firing the laser, and it took about 4 days to really drive them out, and then it was just maintenance. It's just a few shots. There were two occasions where flocks of 100 ravens would fly right over this place, and not a single one of them would go down for the nuts. They all knew, hey man, you go down there, you're going to get the nasty green light in the face. And they flew right by, and it's just like, this works. But that was a handheld laser, and that was me up for a month in this crazy tower. So how do you know the thing works, how do you configure it such that you can deliver that light as efficiently as possible in terms of the investment, particularly of human time? Humans are the expensive part of the equation. Human attention is the expensive, like hiring people to do stuff is expensive. So we're now working on ways of distributing human consciousness, the consciousness of a single human being over many places simultaneously. It's a network solution, as they say. And that's where we're getting to the point where this is going to be commercially viable, because human consciousness is great. Artificial intelligence is primitive and untrustworthy at this point. We're totally up to speed on decision making and on patience. I started thinking about this, and it's just like, we want humans in the loop because they have good judgment, particularly if they're well trained. We don't yet know how to tame artificial intelligence. Some of this stuff that's happened with Tesla cars, the automatic driving thing, indicates that it's just like, oh, it's not as slick. Like, we see the movies, the AIs in the movies that fool all the humans and all that. Maybe it's coming, but it's not there yet. So how do you create a hybrid system that uses the advantages of AI, which are undeniable, really raw power, raw recognition power. But how do you make a hybrid system where you get the advantage of human oversight and human judgment and human patience and human gut feelings? Because we have gut feelings. We sense when things are off, and a human being will say, you can train a human being even in the face of apparent good situation to fire a laser. If a human being picks something up and says it doesn't feel right, they will not fire the laser. We're not there with AI. AI is just like, oh, the conditions for a safe laser shot have been met. Zap. And then you have a problem.
Right. Human in the loop is a...
Yeah, keep the human in the loop.
Right.
But use the human consciousness as efficiently as possible. Like me with a laser at a place is inefficient.
Right.
It's just like, because right now we're at a sewage treatment plant. We've reduced the numbers of ravens at that by over 95%. We're very close to zero there. Well, our laser operator is bored. There's nothing to do, which is wonderful. And the data is spectacular. I mean, it's like the numbers go along like this, and they just go off a cliff when we start with the lasers, and then they stay low. And so now it's just now it's details. It's like, okay, how do you, and we're very close on a couple of these things. It's super exciting. How do you keep that number low, and how much does it take to keep it low? And if you keep it low at one place, then maybe you can do 20 places or 40 places.
By telecommuting in.
And then add in the AI as an alert system. And then, Well, I'm pretty optimistic about this one. We're figuring this out.
It seems logical that you could do that, and it seems like in the long arc of time, you should be able to fully automate it.
Yes.
I'm sure that's coming.
Yep.
So it sounds like the value prop to your customers, across a few industries is cost reduction. In the case of ag, it's reducing waste and
losses
right,
to a pest species.
And on the utility side, it's preventing fires. Is that the main value prop, or are there multiple?
I mean, well, yes, it's preventing fires, but then think about the implication of fires. There is the loss of the equipment. There's burning down poles, but there's interruption of service. That's not good. I talked to a utility guy, and he said they have 1940s wooden substations that have burned down. And he says, when we lose a substation, we lose a town. It's like, that's not good. But the real slammer is the potential for these fires that are up in poles to hit the ground and cause catastrophic wildfires. And that is real. And utilities have statistics on the proportion of fires that they have to deal with that are caused by animals. I think it's around 15% are caused by animal contact, it's called, which is adjacent wires on one of the low wood distribution poles. A bird takes off and it flaps its wings, and one wing hits one conductor and one wing hits the other, and the bird becomes a circuit, and well, they build nests on top of the transformers, which are very convenient nest platforms, and the ravens really appreciate it. But and ravens love to integrate chunks of wire into their nests, and so you've got this wire conductor up in amongst 12,000 to 33,000 to 60,000 volts. Not a good combination, and starting a wildfire is not a good thing for anybody. And there's a whole bunch of negative effects of those fires getting out of hand and becoming catastrophic. And I have now looked at that. I'll tell you, it's super exciting to think if we can prevent this phenomenon of these birds nesting on this infrastructure, we can save human lives. That's really cool. Like I'm trying to say tortoise lives. That's what got me into it. And now I've just stumbled into this circumstance where not only am by eliminating raven nesting, I'll be saving wildlife because ravens won't be able to use we. I have to change the pronoun. It's we. I've got a team. It's like incredible team and this community of collaborators. It's not me. I'm one person. So understand that. If I fall into this eye, it's the royal eye. It's like we are doing this. At any rate, the idea of saving human lives and saving all that habitat and saving all the lungs of human beings that will have to breathe the smoke and on, it's like, that's exciting. It's cool.
I was in the Bay Area a few years ago when we had those orange skies, and I remember it well. Like if you're ever going to think about what the apocalypse would look like, that's what it felt like.
And some number of those can be prevented by intervening and denying birds the opportunity to nest on those poles. Absolutely certain. So, it's like I'm not a superhero or anything like that, but I'm a lucky recipient of an opportunity to do a whole lot of good for a whole lot of entities and interests simultaneously. It's really great.
Let me ask you another question, and let me know if this is, if we're going down the wrong path here. But have you received any pushback from your fellow conservation biologists for this kind of proactive approach?
skepticism. I ran into this dude the other day. I was giving a talk for a bunch of biologists who are dealing with ravens and other avian predators wiping out a series of threatened and endangered shorebirds. And this guy, I came in, the proselytizing for the application of lasers, and he wasn't buying it. And he and I, in a friendly, collegial way, kind of went at it. And he was like, oh, it's not going to work. So there's that skepticism. My partner, Mercy Vaughn, did a very clever thing when we started egg oiling. She said, we've got to go talk to all the animal rights activists. We've got to tell them ahead of time. And I learned so much from that because we went to them rather than them hearing about it through some news article and imagining what it was and filling in the blanks with the scariest option. We went to them ahead of the case. We said, here's what we're planning. Here's why we're doing it. We want you to know ahead of time. What do you think about it? Not a single one of them, including PETA, said, oh, get ready for the picketers. They just said, we understand why you're doing it. We're not, the reactions range from, we support this. Audubon Society said, yeah, we're for this because we understand that there's an emergency. At the far end of the spectrum was PETA, and they said, well, we can't voice support for this, but we won't oppose it. That was a big lesson. It's just like, go and talk to people. Don't be afraid to tell them what you're doing and explain why you're doing it, and do it before you're doing it. When you think it's going to work, go talk to them. So, yeah, there's skepticism. There are undoubtedly people who don't like it. There is concern about avian vision and the effect of lasers on avian vision. And those are valid. It's all valid. And the skepticism is valid. It's just like, if I can't handle, like, some of this stuff's pretty crazy. And I wouldn't be, well, I should expect skepticism, and it's fine. Skepticism makes the thing better because you have to deal with it. You have to answer the questions, and you have to answer them for yourself first. So, there's that.
Got it. Do you plan to use these techniques for other invasive species down the road? Can you talk about what? And I know
Sure.
You've got your hands full with ravens right now. There's a big problem, but down the road,
Oh, yeah.
what else is?
No, the whole
in
the
scope?
whole point is not. It's like, it's great, and I'm totally driven by saving desert tortoises. But the way to make this succeed and be maximally effective is to create a template that other people can adopt. So a colleague of mine just went to South Africa. There's a bunch of tortoises in South Africa that are getting hammered by their version of ravens and crows. Well, we've got the weaponized version. All we need is a different model on top of the machine, and we're there. But then I have examples in my bag of 3D printed eggs. And so we are thinking of inserting fake eggs into the nests of prey species and having them deliver a surprise. We don't know exactly what yet, but yeah, so it's like, it's great. The thing about give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. It's basically that. It's like, solve the problem for one species, and great, you've saved that species. But if you create a model that's applicable widely, and the cool thing then is also you engage the brains of people who are familiar with particular problems, and you say, here's the toolkit, what would you do with it?
Right.
And so that's the way to maximize the effect.
So people are finding out, they're finding you, they're finding out about what you're doing. And that's going to be even more true because we have this EcoHack film that's coming out. Can you talk a little bit about, that? I mean, I had the opportunity to have an advanced screening, but how can people kind of find that eventually?
I spent and my team, members of the team, were interviewed by these couple of filmmakers. And it was very interesting because when you start, it's just like, okay, these guys want to bring cameras and follow us around. That's fine. We talked to them, blah, blah, blah. They turned it into this really well done documentary, 16 minutes long. So it's a short. It's now in circulating among film festivals. Late spring or early summer, it's scheduled to be streaming on the New Yorker. New Yorker magazine has a streaming service. So it's going to be, it got picked up by them. It's going to be, strangely enough, in airplanes somewhere, which is just very amusing to me. And so it's called EcoHack with an exclamation point. Watch out for it. It's very cool. And I'll tell you, as the subject, the main subject of the film, they take away all this film and I go, well, what am I going to look like coming out of this? And what's Hardshell going to look like coming out of it? They did a remarkable job of reflecting, like, had I the skills to do that, that's exactly the story I would have told. Because it's exciting, it's funny. You get to meet Frank Guercio, who's this crazy engineer I work with, who's a freaking brilliant kid. He's 25 or so, and he's actually the horsepower behind all these gizmos we're generating. And it's like me. It's just like, it's funny and hopeful, which is kind of how I look at myself. And so it's great. It's a really good piece of work.
It's brilliant. And shout out to Jen for some amazing editing.
Incredible editing. Well done, Jen.
Yeah, she really is amazing. Let's turn the conversation back to you a little bit.
It's all about me.
I know. I just want to.
This is the funny thing. The funny thing is, I went out. I lived out in the desert, basically for large chunks of. I figure I spent about 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years, completely alone in the desert, and my ego evaporated entirely because there was no reinforcement for it. Like when you're alone, you're not getting any ego strokes, any react. The tortoises didn't give a shit about my ego. They didn't reinforce my ego. And so it went away. And now, like, I'm spreading the word, and obviously I'm pretty full of this stuff. And there's all this ego hack. There's all this ego reinforcement coming in. But I feel really blessed to have spent my youth basically immune from it. Because now I recognize it when it comes in, and I just don't feel like a victim of my own ego. I have one, but it's this thing that I can manage. It's a manageable entity.
I'd love to hear more about that, actually, because I do sense this sort of, I think you said earlier, like kind of inner peace or quiet.
Oh yeah.
Just tell me a little bit more about that time alone, that time in nature, and how it affected you.
The Zen community portrays our being and our consciousness sort of as an ocean. And you can hang out in the choppy waves at the surface and just get beaten around. But there's deep stillness down below. When I went out to the desert, all that choppy stuff disappeared. There was no chop. There was no psychic choppiness to my existence. There was nothing but depth. It was an absolutely calm environment in which to immerse myself. And so I didn't have to go seek the depths and the calm and all that. It was there. And so I just lived in it. It's total dumb luck. I mean, I was just a schmucky 23-year-old kid, just full of bullshit that had been programmed into me by the society, and I just got lucky. I just got paid to go out and be alone, and now that I've immersed myself back in the world of human beings because I want to get something done, and I need other human beings to do it. It's more of a game. The whole ego play is more of a game. I don't feel like I'm the victim of my ego. And I don't feel like I'm being run by my ego. An ego is a really handy tool, but you don't want to be run by the tool. You want to use the tool, not be the tool. So that's sort of, that's the the great blessing of my youth is that it prepared me for this. But the strange thing is, I used to be a tortoise and now I'm a raven. It's like I've taken on the character of the creature that I'm spending most of my time, folks, and I can feel it. There's an old tortoise down inside me, but the surface of me is now this opportunist looking around like, where's the money? Where's the stuff? Who can I talk to? Da, 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 da. Even this is like part of raven behavior. Like, this is an opportunity. You're going to reach an audience I want to talk to. And so that's raven behavior. Tortoise would be sitting back. It's like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. What's the downside of it? That's tortoises are amazing. They're so careful and quiet and subtle, and they have to be careful. And so I would like our species to go from being a bunch of ravens to being more tortoise-like. And that would be the tragedy of losing tortoises, is they have something to teach us about how to be an earthling, and lessons we desperately need right now, because we're flapping around like crazy ravens. And it's fine while the party's still going, but we're running out of party supplies. And tortoises are tuned to not be silly. Ravens can be pretty silly creatures. Tortoises are not silly. They're careful. And so the longer, like, I have the goal of just like, I want 7 generations from now, kids to be able to go out and hang out with tortoises and get what they have to give, because they gave it to me. I didn't know what I was getting I didn't know the gift I was getting when I went out there and started chasing after tortoises and catching them and photographing them and looking at them real carefully and picking up the carcasses and all. I didn't have a clue what I was getting. Like, the gift was immense and completely unscripted, could not have been predicted, but I got it. It's like, thanks.
Before the podcast started, we were talking a little bit about your life in Alaska. Mm-hmm. And it kind of relates to this point in that, well, you say it best, but it's like the human connection with nature. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think I look at things through the lens of an evolutionary biologist. That's really I think in terms of hundreds of thousands of years and of evolutionary tracks and processes. And I did, like, 50 years means nothing to me in the way I think. It just doesn't register much. And we're like these little sparks. We're just like, boom, man, 50 years ago I was this kid and now I'm this old guy. And this is the result of 300 million years of evolution. So the time frame is really different. And so we evolved on the plains of Africa, and we evolved in a healthy environment that cared for us and could support us. As long as we didn't overexploit it, it predictably worked for us. Here's the contrarian. I'm getting to the contrarian part. And time went on and we spread around and we're good predators and we succeeded. We were a successful design. And then we figured out agriculture. Everybody, like, I eat agricultural goods. I look at agriculture as the biggest mistake in the history of this planet. Because, like ravens, I just said, ravens turn excess energy into copies of themselves in the form of their babies. We do this. We have done the same thing. There's 8 billion of us on this planet now, and we're taxing the thing. So when I went to Alaska, particularly when I went to where I live now, Haines, I immediately and instinctively felt the health of the ecosystem and the fact that it was intact. It fed me and feeds me really well, and it feeds my soul really well, because when I'm there, it's like I see bears and I see moose and I catch salmon and I catch shrimp and I catch crabs and I eat them, and the place feeds me, and we grow a garden, it's a byproduct of agriculture, but it's this little nice garden in our front yard, and it feeds us. And I live pretty relatively light impact on the planet when I'm there, and I can feel it. And we need to get back to that somehow. We're a long way from it right now and going in the wrong direction, frankly. So my efforts are to, well, I don't qualify. It's like, maybe this stuff's all going to matter. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But I look at it this way. I might be able to save the planet, or a significant chunk of it. I could. I mean, it's a possibility. Maybe it's hopeless. But as long as I'm here, it's much more fun to have hope and go at this stuff and bring energy and try stuff and experiment and knock heads with other people and see what they've got going and encourage them and all that. It's way more fun. It's just more entertaining. It's than moping and waiting for the end of the world. That's just boring. I like stimulation, so there's that.
I share your sense of wonder and connection with nature. I always say that like going out into nature is like my religion, my church. Mm-hmm. I just feel more at peace. That's why that's why I love living here. I mean, it's no Alaska, but there's lots of different places to get out. You in the film, mm-hmm. you are quoted by talking about this exact subject around your impact, right, with what you're doing with Hardshell, and you use this cathedral reference. Mm-hmm. Could you expand on that just for the audience?
Cathedrals were structures that were completely out of scale for the communities that generated them, and they took hundreds, in certain cases, hundreds of years to build. But somebody had to start, somebody had to lay the foundation. Like we look at the cathedral and it's soaring up hundreds of feet in the air and the stained glass and the whole thing. But somebody had to lay the first brick or the thing wouldn't exist. And that someone was not going to be alive when the stained glass got put in. They had to commit to it and decide, this is worthy of effort, and I never get to see the final result. There won't be a final result in what I'm trying to do, but I think of myself as sort of a bricklayer. It's like I'm doing what I can with the tools that are available right now, frankly right now, to salvage as much as possible. Like just to keep the pieces. We're trying restoration stuff, but mostly I feel like a first responder, not to mix the metaphors. I'm a bricklayer, but I'm also an ecological first responder. I'm showing up at the scene of the horrible accident and just trying to keep as many critters going as possible. And so like the template model here is like, if we can figure it out for desert tortoises, maybe it can be replicated widely for other species. So the thing that paralyzes us is this feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. And the thing that stimulates us and gets us to move is the feeling that we can make a difference. So I'm going to spring a little thing on you.
Let's do it.
We're working on devices that connect a human being remotely to the environment, such that that human being can have an effect over internet distances, essentially. And the real punchline for us, and my real passion, like all the stuff we've been talking about, is just the preliminary to turning this action into a series of online games where there's a vast pool of human consciousness playing meaningless games. And it's like, they're not all going to want to save the world, but I bet there's a bunch of them that if there was meaning attached to their activity, they'd be on board. So we know lasers are effective at solving certain problems. There's no reason that a laser can't be remotely operated. And we're actually doing it right now.
Wow. That is mind blowing.
So out there and if you want to get on board, this is like, and I had a mystical experience 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago in February. And this dropped into my brain. And I'll tell you, it didn't come from inside me. It was like a homework assignment from the universe. It's like, what if saving the world was fun? What if it was enjoyable? Because the standard model of environmentalism is really depressing.
Right.
And I understand it and I share it. It's just like, shit, everything's going away. Like, what if play was the basis? And then I started looking at it. Like, I got this bolt. I'm telling you, it was a lightning bolt. It's like came into my brain. It's like, games, play games. And it's like, yeah, because games are it's an incentive structure to get stuff done. And like tic-tac-toe is dumb. It's zeros, X's, and O's. We play tic-tac-toe and we play Pokemon and we play this and we play that. We're playful creatures. And it suddenly is just like, God, it makes so much sense that you would align the pleasure drive of humans. Like all you have to do is channel it to do some good in the world. And now we have the technology to do it. It's incredibly exciting.
Wow. That makes so much sense to me. I mean, you know, the rise of esports.
Absolutely.
And even Pokemon Go is actually even an interesting corollary because you're out in the world, you're doing even though a lot of it's imaginary, but I could definitely imagine a game where, there's a raven that shows up somewhere, you get an alert, you get to go there and you get to fly a drone and
you're not going to have to imagine it much longer.
And you know where
we're working on this. We're working this is like this below the surface. This is the thing we're really going for right now.
Amazing.
Yep.
And the reinforcing aspect for this for me is if for people who watch this film, this eco hack, you guys are having fun.
Yeah.
You guys are having a blast. You're laughing. You're watching you're watching the ravens, and you can tell the joy and play that you guys have. So I can envision. And we haven't talked about this before, but democratizing that.
So here's one that's like the lasers and first-person shooters and all that. But I've spent my life just hanging out with tortoises and being thrilled and intrigued by them. We're working on a device that's a remotely driven rover with camera equipped. And the nominal point of the exercise is to create a robot field biologist that can go out with AI programming, recognize signs of tortoises and tortoises themselves in the environment, register them, do all the data, blah, blah, blah. But what I envision is a kid in a wheelchair in Cleveland is a tortoise biologist. He's driving this thing around. He sees a tortoise, because the beautiful thing, we've actually done this. We made an internet connected rover and we drove it up next to tortoises. They happened to be they were captive tortoises, but they were tortoises that lived a pretty natural-ish life, and I trust their response. And for about 5 minutes, they're kind of looking at this thing. It's like, what the hell is that? And after there's nothing happens from it, they completely ignored it. And so now you've got this perspective from eye level with the tortoise. You're driving along with the thing, and you get to watch them be tortoises, not tortoises in response to the presence of a potential predator, which is a human being, which has been my standard relationship to tortoises is I scare them in discovering them, and then they kind of look out and figure out I'm okay or not, or they just stay shut up, because that's the careful thing to do, is just close the drawbridge. But the idea of a massive community of online observers of animals living their lives in front of them, and the things you see, like I have I've developed the ability to be around tortoises and not scare them. And the stuff they show you when they're not frightened is mind-blowing. Like, just trust me. The subtlety, the sexual politics of tortoises, their navigational abilities, their sense of enjoyment is astounding. And you would never know it to look at a dumb turtle. We have this prejudice like, oh, they're slow and cute and they're probably pretty dumb. They don't get to be dumb and survive out there. They've been doing this for 300 million years. They're really good at it and they're really smart. So the idea of giving people the opportunity to get that, because then they don't have to go out for 35 years and live in the dirt. It's like, how do I distill the gift that I talked about that came from tortoises and package it for the screen age? That's the goal. It's like, take it and share it. Because if people start having experiences like that, rather than the desert being this dull thing you drive through on the way to Vegas to have fun, it becomes, oh my God, there's incredible stuff going on out there. We have to fall in love with this planet again. We have to. That is required. That's a prerequisite for survival right now. With 8 billion of us on the planet, we have got to fall in love with this place. And I'm looking, it's like, I'm in love with it. So how do I share that? How do I give other people the opportunity and the motivation to fall in love with it? The doorway is enjoyment. It's fun.
Wow.
There you go.
I'm totally with you. I mean, as a kid, I was obsessed with nature, but I felt like I could only interact with it. I was obsessed with animals and creatures, and I feel like I could only interact with. I had those Audubon cards. I don't know if you remember those. And
Yep.
And the idea of and oftentimes you go out into nature, but you don't necessarily see too much, right? But the idea of being able to democratize that like very unique experience you have of, you know, being a conservation biologist or like a wildlife photographer, a lot of things people wish they could do, but if they could get little bite-sized pieces of it,
and
be amazing.
And make a difference.
Right.
Like, the problem we have is that we feel overwhelmed by the scale of this system and we feel powerless. And giving people something to do that's positive and I think it's going to be revolutionary. I really do. Like, it's the missing piece. It's the missing piece in conservation and environmentalism. It's like, what do you get to do? You get to give money to people that are asking other people for money. I mean, I hate to be that crude about it, but that's the model. That's the business model of a lot of environmental organizations, is they're constantly having to ask for money. It's like, that's, you know, and the way they jolt our adrenal glands constantly with tales of disaster or impending disaster. And it's just, I think it's a crappy marketing strategy. Here's what I like. The planet is this ball of miracles. There are just billions, trillions of miracles per second are occurring. It's this wonder. It's this utter wonder. It's an incredible product. It needs just a good PR firm. And we're screen-based. We live through screens. Everything's going to come at us through screens. We ought to put planet Earth on the screen. I'm sort of like the advanced scout. I'm the location scout for this. And I've done it. It's like I went out and hung out in the desert. It's like, holy shit, look at that. Whoa, what's that over there? Oh, there's a rattlesnake. Cool. Like, if we just give them access to the living planet, they will fall in love with it. And there's a distinction between watching a documentary and participating in, like, being. We can now transmit our consciousness to a degree through these screens and devices and all that kind of stuff. We can kind of be there, but we can damn sight more be there with those things than any other way. And tens of thousands of people can share an experience like that. And then there's a community that's talking about it. Oh, did you see them do that? Oh my God, they made it. Da, da, da. There was copulation. Did you see that? Oh my shit. Then there was that fight. like I've seen all this from tortoises. Tortoise fights are incredibly exciting and interesting and entertaining. You see two male tortoises going at it. It is just like, it's remarkable. And they're exceptional athletes. Nobody knows that. I know it. And that's just one tiny little fragment. I've studied one creature.
Right.
And then I look at all the other creatures, and then I look at all the other places on the planet. It's like, we just have to pay attention. All we have to do is just have a way to look at it and interact with it and try to help it. It's like, might as well go for it, you know? It's like, I'm an old guy and I want to get some stuff done before I'm composted. And like, this feels so great. I'm having so much fun. I have to have fun. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm in the game. Right. That's why I put up with having to make payroll and all that kind of crap. Yeah. It's just like, it's the cost of admission.
Well, it's a unique and inspiring vision that I really hadn't seen before. So, and I'm sure a lot of people out there haven't either. It's the question we ask every guest. What is your most contrarian opinion?
That capitalism is deeply problematic from an ecological perspective. Maybe it's this manifestation of capitalism and I'm missing something, but it seems like a model that is insensitive to long feedback loops. That sounds like gobbledygook, but a feedback loop generates information you need to have in order to successfully manage a situation. And if you don't get the message back in time, or you're not paying attention to messages that are slow in returning to you, you can make decisions in the short term that make perfect sense in the short term that are disastrous in the long term. I think that's the clash between capitalism and the life support system of the planet. I think capitalism won. Everybody has adopted capitalism as the model for operating, and I think it's probably was an inevitability. It feels like an evolutionary inevitability for a mass system, a civilization on the scale we're operating. But we have to reform it really rapidly because we're killing the planet. It's like, I'm watching the planet die, and not very many people are paying as close attention as I do. And I'm just watching. It's not just tortoises. It's like the desert is being depopulated by what we're doing to the planet. But I have accepted capitalism as inevitable. And so it's not like, oh, I wish we had a different system than capitalism. It's just like, capitalism is it. So now it's like, get over that. It's like, how do you operate here? How do you reform it to the degree it can be reformed, or operate within it to have the maximum effect on the assumption and in the hope that a form of capitalism will arise that isn't inimical to our long-term survival. Right now, it feels like we're trying to commit suicide, like planetary suicide. It really feels that way as a biologist. And I don't like that. I have a daughter on this planet. I'd really like her to have a living planet to occupy, and all the rest of the daughters and sons on the planet. I'm hanging out with friends of mine. In fact, I'm staying with one of the producers one of the creators of EcoHack, and he's got a 7-month-old baby who is just a doll. She's just like an incredibly cute, bright, attractive organism, and she should have the opportunity to grow up on a living planet that has the potential to persist. When I'm in Haines, I feel that way. I feel like, this could actually just keep going. When I'm in the Mojave Desert, I don't feel that way. And I want to feel that. I want everybody everywhere to have a feeling that they're safe and that they can that the earth can support them. That's what I want. How do we reform capitalism to bring that about? I don't know. It's not my, what do they say? It's above my pay grade. It isn't above my pay grade though, but it's just not my area of expertise.
Right.
Like how do you rewire a planetary economic system such that it doesn't kill itself? It's a valid question.
Very valid.
How's that?
That's great. That's perfect.
Is that contrarian enough for you?
It's pretty contrarian.
That's pretty contrarian.
Especially when talking to a venture capitalist. No, that's perfect.
No, you need to figure out how to do venture capital.
Yes.
You need to align venture capital with the interests of your kids and your kids' kids and your kids' kids' kids and on down the line.
And that's exactly what
that's
I'm
a solvable
doing
problem.
and what we're doing. And
I'm
that's
sure
the irony.
That's a solvable problem.
That's the irony, in both our situations, because we both have that mindset, and we're leveraging capitalism, as imperfect as it is, to try to solve multiple problems at the same time. Yeah. So we share that in common.
And I bet you're pretty optimistic about the potential for doing so, or you wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. We share that in common.
We're flying in formation.
Hey, Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
How can people find you, follow you, track everything you're doing?
I'm really crappy at social media, and our company is so small, and we've had to focus on survival. So we haven't done all we have the channels and we have the things, but they just aren't active. But hardshellabs.com, good old boring website, you get a sense of that. I'm creating a series of videos called Hardshell Minutes, which is 1 minute bursts of, like, I just go out in the world and I see something. It's like I talk about it for a minute, sometimes a minute and a half. So I'm kind of working on that, but go see EcoHack. EcoHack's really good. Here's another one. Look up, in 2014, I gave a talk at TEDx Berkeley. It's called Playing for Keeps. Look at that. It's a 20-minute TEDx talk that actually came in, like a year after the lightning bolt came into my brain. And it was like I downloaded this whole thing I've been talking about is just the ripple downstream of that. So you can look at that and see a 10-year younger version of me and just like wild-eyed, wow, I had this thought about games. So that's a good one. Go see that. Email me, t.shields@hardshellabs.com. Like I read emails. I'm an old guy. I don't hold with this Facebook stuff, but people can email me. So,
hey, email the tried and true.
Just email me. And, maybe 10,000 emails will come at me because I just said that and I won't be able to dig through them. But usually they come in 2s and 3s and I answer them. It's just like, what do you got going? What are you interested in? How do our interests align? How can we work together? If you like what I'm into, it's like, could always use the help.
I think there are a lot of people that are going to like what you're into. I'm certainly
Let's go for it.
Let's do it.
We got a hell of just this miraculous sphere. It just struck me the other day. It's just like, we've got giraffes on this planet. You ever thought about a giraffe? That is an unlikely creature. And you could look at it two ways, like giraffes are in trouble, but we still have giraffes on the planet. So it's like the glass half full thing is we've got giraffes on the planet. Let's keep giraffes around and tortoises, blue whales. And then I just extended. It's like mosquitoes are really cool. Flies are really amazing creatures. And the whole ball is just like this. We're on this ball of miracles. We just have to realize it. We just have to wake up. It's like, holy shit, this place is really cool.
I'm right there with you.
All right.
Thank you, Tim, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you.
Pleasure. It was fun.
All right.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.